Most land in California has never been surveyed. That's going to surprise a lot of people. A lot of people that are listening to this video are going to say, what? That's crazy. Right? You got to be kidding me, right? No, not kidding you. Most land in California has never been surveyed, and that's probably true for much of the land in the United States. It's just part of the way our real estate system works. So that includes your parcel. So the parcel of land that you own could be your parcel for your home or your farm or your factory, your store or your office. That's probably never been surveyed. It also includes the parcels next door to your parcel. They've probably never been surveyed either. I would say probably somewhere between 70 to 80% of the property that we look at here at Redefined Horizons has never been surveyed. Now, you could argue that we're probably seeing a higher percentage than the actual percentage of unsurveyed land because we're dealing with problems. That's fair. But no matter how you slice it, 70 or 80% is a huge number. Even if it's smaller than that, the actual number, it's still the majority. So the majority of land in California has never been surveyed. So is that really true? I mean, it sounds ridiculous, right? What do you mean all that land's never been surveyed? Yes, it is actually true. So I want to just take some time to kind of myth bust a little bit. I want to bust 5 myths that people have about how often land gets surveyed in California, and this idea that most land has been surveyed is a myth, and so I want to bust that myth. And so there's 5 things that people think or believe or say when it comes to this idea of all this land being surveyed. And so I want to just debunk those 5 myths. But let me give you the list. Let me give you the 5. So here's the first one. Everything got surveyed in the beginning, Landon. So of course it's been surveyed. We surveyed everything when we started, right? So it's kind of this, in the beginning there was a survey idea. So that's the first myth. Second myth, everything has to be surveyed whenever it's sold. Some people think that. Well, what do you mean? It should have got surveyed the last time it was sold. Okay, we'll talk about why that's not true. The third myth is parcels are surveyed when they're created. In other words, at the time of the subdivision, when you take a bigger parcel and split it up into smaller parcels, well, it's got to be surveyed then, right? A lot of people think that. I'm going to show you why that's not true, not actually true. The fourth one is, well, title companies make you get a survey, right? When you're buying or selling land, especially non-residential land, a farm or a factory or an office, the title company's going to make you get a survey, right? That's not true. Actually, title companies don't do that. We're going to talk about sometimes there is somebody that makes you get a survey, but it's in a very limited set of circumstances, and so we'll talk about that. And then finally, the other thing sometimes people will say, especially people in the real estate industry that have some familiarity with boundary surveying, will say, well, the surveyor, every time a surveyor does a survey, he's got every time he establishes a boundary for somebody, he's got to file a survey, right? That's only half true. So there are some situations in which a surveyor has to, if he establishes a boundary for a client, he has to file a survey, an official survey, but we're going to see why that doesn't happen as often as it should, and it really only applies in a limited set of circumstances. So, what do I mean when I say surveyed, in air quotes? When I tell you most land in California hasn't been surveyed, quote unquote, what do I mean? Here's what I mean. What I mean is after a proper boundary resolution, that property, the description of the property and the deed has been laid out on the ground, the corners have been marked by monuments, and a map has been prepared and filed. And we do that in California, we do that at the county level. Okay. The state agencies and federal agencies may also file maps in their own records, but private surveyors, we're required to file copies of our survey at the county level, especially if we set monuments. So that's what I mean. Is your parcel in its current configuration, has a surveyor gone through the process of working through your land description and your deed that granted you the property and put that description on the ground in its current configuration? Are the corners marked, and was there a map prepared and filed? Okay, that's what I mean. And what I'm talking about is the actual land description. So I don't care if it's, if that land description has been surveyed, but it was surveyed 5 transactions ago, that doesn't matter. What's really important for this discussion is, has that current description of the property been put on the ground by a land surveyor? Okay. So let's go ahead and debunk these myths, these 5 myths we've got. So here's the first one. I'm just reading from my list here. Everything got surveyed in the beginning. So in the beginning, there was a survey, a bunch of surveys, and the government surveyed everything, and so all property's been surveyed at some point. And so that's not true. There were some very large, extensive government surveys done when the United States was a young country. In fact, those surveys are still occurring in Alaska, some other parts of the country. But you need to remember a couple things about those surveys. First of all, they weren't comprehensive, so they didn't survey everything, especially if there was rugged terrain, swampland, or mountains. That didn't get surveyed, even in the original surveys. Sometimes there was fraud. The surveyor said he surveyed it, but he really didn't. He just drew a map in the saloon. That doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened. It happened in California. The other thing is a lot of those original surveys are old. So on the East Coast, you might have surveys that are 200 or 250 years old. In the West Coast, for example, in California, some of our surveys are getting to be 100, 150 years old now. They didn't, the evidence they set wasn't always meant to last that long. So in some places in California, they dug pits to mark the corner, or they set wood posts to mark the corner. That evidence has been gone or destroyed. You also got to remember, most of those surveys from 100 years or 150 years or 200 years ago, they were not exactly what we would call accurate by modern standards. So they were certainly, many of them were astonishingly well done by dedicated surveyors for the time period that we were living in, that they were living in, but they definitely wouldn't meet the requirements of a modern survey. And the other thing is, surveyors have gotten better. We used to kind of but the quality of your typical surveyor has gotten better. That we've become more professional. In the old days, we drank too much. So we still drink a lot, but we drink less. All right, so yes, there may have been a government survey at some point a long time ago when land was first going from the government into private ownership, but you can't really rely on that in today's modern age. That survey is important, and as a boundary surveyor, I need to know it and understand it and do my best to put it back on the ground when that's required. But that 150-year-old government survey is not a survey of your parcel most of the time. Myth number 2, land has to be surveyed every time it is sold. That is true. Some parts of the world, they have a system like that. That is not true in California. I don't believe it's true anywhere in the United States, in fact. I'd love to hear from you if that is not true in your part of the United States, but certainly in California, you can buy and sell land to your heart's content and never get a survey. And in fact, that's what happens most of the time. I would say probably 95% of the transactions in California, there is no survey when the property is bought or sold. Now, some people say, well, we should just require it. We should require every time that you buy or sell land, you should get a survey. At least we should require it if the parcel hasn't been surveyed before. We should make you get a survey. Surveyors would love that. Most of them, I would not. I don't like working for clients that have to spend the money because somebody else tells them. Those aren't good clients. They don't like paying that bill. If you don't believe me, you haven't done enough elevation certificates or land title surveys. So I don't think that's the right decision. I want people to get surveys because they see the value in a survey. But the simple truth is, you can buy and sell land without a survey as much as you want in California. Okay, the third myth is parcels are surveyed when they're created, in other words, at the time of subdivision. That is also not true. It can be true. So in California now, as a general rule, we don't let you create new parcels without a subdivision map and with having monuments in the ground. But there's all kinds of loopholes to that rule. First of all, that rule hasn't always been in place. So for a long time in California, you could create new parcels by deed. That requirement for a map can still be waived today, so we still let you create parcels by deed if you're the government or if you meet certain conditions. So that requirement is not universally applied. A lot of times you may have a subdivision map, but monuments aren't set on the lot corners. So my house is an example of that. It was subdivided in the early 2000s, and there are centerline monuments in at the intersections, but my individual lot corners have not been marked. Okay, so just because you're in a subdivision map doesn't mean your corners are set. And monuments are destroyed, so if your subdivision's old subdivisions, a lot of the times those monuments are gone. We like to pave over monuments. We like to build block walls on top of them. A lot of older subdivisions in California, either the corners were never set or they were set with wood hubs, things like that just haven't lasted 100 years. The other thing is parcels change shape. So especially if you've got an older subdivision, you may own lot 1, lot 2, and half of lot 3, or the lot lines get rejiggered, people sell fractions of lots, and so those boundaries haven't necessarily been surveyed and marked on the ground, especially the boundaries of the fractional lots. Okay, myth number 4, title companies make you get a survey. Not true, not true, not true. Title companies don't care if you have a survey or not. And I've never heard of a situation where a title company has made somebody get a survey. So banks might make you get a survey. If you're dealing with a non-residential parcel and you're getting a loan for the purchase, and the bank wants to get good title insurance coverage, so they want to remove the survey exception from title coverage, then they may require you to get a special kind of survey. It's called a land title survey. But again, that's only on non-residential transactions. That's only if you're financing through a bank. That's only if the bank wants to remove the survey exception from the title insurance coverage, and it doesn't happen all the time. Small percentage of transactions, okay? And just because you get that kind of survey, it's called a land title survey, doesn't mean that the surveyor sets monuments, and it doesn't mean that the surveyor files a copy of his map with the county. So lots of loopholes in that rule too. All right, the final myth, number 5, surveyors have to file a map if they tell you where the boundary is. That is only half true. So that only applies in certain circumstances. So it has to be a parcel that's never been mapped before. And the surveyor has to do a field survey, so he actually has to get on the ground and look for stuff on the ground. If he meets those 2 requirements, so the parcel's never been surveyed and he's gone out and done some measurements in the ground, then he does by law have to file a map with the county if he or she has done that. It's called a record of survey in California. But again, a narrow set of circumstances, and lots of surveyors break that rule. They don't follow the law. It's something that embarrasses me as a land surveyor, but it's true. Even well-known companies. I know some well-known large engineering companies in the Bay Area. I find 3, 4, 5, 6 surveys a year that they do that haven't been filed, even though they were required to do so by law. So we do have a law in California. The intent is to get parcels surveyed and get those surveys officially mapped in the official records. But like all laws, it is not perfectly implemented or enforced or followed. So that leaves us a couple questions. I'm not going to answer in this video, but I want to leave you with them. We'll try and do them in future videos. If there's all these parcels that haven't been surveyed, how do we get stuff built? How do we build walls and fences and buildings? That's a good question. We'll try and answer it. And then finally, what kind of problems do we have? If you thought all this land was surveyed, now I'm telling you, well, actually most land in California isn't surveyed. Well, that can't be a good thing, right? No, it's not a good thing. It causes lots of problems. So we'll talk about what kind of problems does it cause, and what do you need to look out for if you're buying land that maybe hasn't been surveyed. So there you go. Most land in California hasn't been surveyed. Probably includes your parcel. Probably includes your neighbor's parcel too.